Welcome to Module 2 of the OCAT Virtual Training Series, incorporating a trauma-informed approach to navigate sensitive topics. The Virtual Training Series is designed for staff wanting to refresh their knowledge and skills, staff who are responsible for training or coaching others, and new OCAT staff. The training modules within the series are designed for individuals, but can be used in a group setting by supervisors and trainers to strengthen caseworker skills. Throughout the modules, you will be directed to resources and practice exercises intended to enhance the learning experience. In this module, you will explore connections between poverty, trauma, and executive functioning, consider how substance use disorders, mental health disorders, and unhealthy or abusive relationships may negatively impact long-term self-sufficiency. Apply a trauma-informed, person-centered approach when navigating sensitive topics with customers. The training is grounded in these guiding principles. These are that each customer is the subject matter expert of their life and has the capacity to grow and change when they are ready and able. Through positive interactions between the caseworker and customer, both have the opportunity to gain a clearer understanding of the customer's circumstances. OCAT is designed to support the caseworker's expertise and experience working with customers. OCAT captures strengths and opportunities that assist caseworkers and customers in working together to develop a relevant and meaningful plan. Another important guiding principle in your work with customers is to strive to be the calm within their storm by working in partnership with them and treating them with dignity and respect. Remember that our customers are experiencing incredibly stressful circumstances. Consider for a moment, if you were one of the customers you serve, how stressful and complicated would you imagine your life to be? Now, imagine that you have multiple systems or programs adding to your stress with tasks and requirements you may not feel you have the time, energy, or resources to accomplish, yet your ability to pay rent or buy food depends on getting the tasks completed. When we pause for a moment to reflect on our customers' circumstances, we are more likely to move in a place of compassion and be more patient. Change in and of itself is stressful, and when added with the level of uncertainty that exists for those living in poverty, the chronic stress understandably takes a toll on physical and mental health, adding to the challenges our customers may face. When we combine the stress of living in poverty with the likelihood that many of our customers also have a history of adverse childhood experiences and/or trauma, we have further compounded the challenges that may get in the way of customers achieving their goals. Let's talk a little bit more about adverse childhood experiences and how those may negatively affect the adult customer you are working with today. Let's first talk about the connections between poverty, trauma, and executive functioning. According to Merriam-Webster, poverty is the state of one who lacks a usual or socially acceptable amount of money or material possessions. This definition is subjective. To define and quantify poverty, the U.S. Census Bureau establishes the poverty threshold, which is a specified dollar amount considered to be the minimum level of resources necessary to meet a family's basic needs. The dollar amount varies depending on number and age of adults and the number of children under 18 in the family unit. Interestingly, the threshold is the same for all states and is not based on the total cost of living. To understand how this works, let's look at a specific example. For many government benefits, including CalWORKs, programs use the following equation to determine whether someone is eligible for benefits. A family's total income must be less than the poverty threshold for the family size and composition. Let's look at the 2018 poverty thresholds. For one adult under 65 and one child under 18 living in the same household, they would have to make less than $17,308 to qualify for benefits. For one adult under 65 and two children under 18 living in the same household, they would have to make less than $20,231 to qualify for benefits. We're going to look at how cash benefits would be applied for two families living just under the poverty threshold for their household size. Our first family, Family A, includes one adult who is non-exempt from program requirements and one child. Their total annual income before benefits is $17,306, which is $2 below the poverty threshold for their household size. In Region 1, they would qualify for $577 cash benefits, bringing their total monthly income to $2,019. Family B includes one adult who is not exempt from program requirements and 2 children. Their total annual income before benefits is $20,000 to $220, which is $11 below the poverty threshold for their household size. In Region 2, they would qualify for $680 cash benefits, bringing their total monthly income to $2,365. Take a moment to think about your own family expenses, or imagine being one of those families. Could you pay for all of your household expenses with the monthly income in the scenarios covered, even with supportive services like transportation, childcare, and food? How much money, if any, would you have left over each month to save or to pay forward for unexpected expenses like a car repair or a child's school supplies? How well could you support your family if your annual income was $1 over the poverty threshold and you did not qualify for CalWORKs? Our programs and services alone will not help customers achieve stability and self-sufficiency, so it is important to remember that we serve as a stepping stone that can assist customers in getting where they want to go. The more we can help customers address their challenges to employment and connect them with meaningful, long-term, livable wage employment, the better able we are to support them towards self-sufficiency. Based on how little a family must make in order to qualify for cash assistance, it is easy to see how incredibly stressful living in poverty can be for our customers. The National Institute of Mental Health defines stress as the brain's response to any demand. It is important to note that the definition relates to the brain's responses, an automatic physiological response, rather than defining stress as someone's psychological response. One aspect about poverty that makes it so stressful is the constant state of change and unpredictability the individual experiences. In our efforts to assist customers and ensure program requirements are satisfied, we inevitably add more change and unpredictability to a customer's life, further adding to their stress. There are key characteristics of stress. A positive stress may be planning for a wedding, whereas a negative stress may be losing your job. An example of recurring stress could be a chronic illness. Short-term stress could be trying to meet a work deadline, where one can see an end in sight. Living in poverty is typically negative and long-term. The severity in which stress affects someone can be broken down into mild, such as a long commute to work, major, which may be a serious unresolved relationship conflict, or extreme, like being exposed to violence. When our brain responds to stress, it signals the body to release stress hormones. Typically, people respond to stress by fighting back, running away and avoiding, or freezing and withdrawing. Although the brain's response to stress has life-saving purposes, unfortunately, our brain responds to all perceived threats and stress similarly. A recurring stress response within the body compromises health, increases a person's likelihood of getting infections, struggling with mental health disorders, and suffering with chronic illness. Additionally, stress impairs brain function by making it difficult to concentrate, to learn new things, to remember, and to effectively problem solve. The overactive stress hormones and the focus of the brain on mitigating constant threats prevents the brain from developing and thriving to its full potential. There has been a lot of research on the effects of toxic stress related to adverse childhood experiences and its impact into adulthood. In the mid-1990s, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and Kaiser Permanente surveyed 17,000 participants on childhood maltreatment, family dysfunction, and current health status and behaviors for a study on adverse childhood experiences, known as ACEs. The ACE pyramid represents the conceptual framework for the ACE study, noting how strongly related ACEs are related to the development of risk factors for diseases, as well as a person's well-being throughout their lifespan. The ACE study found that ACEs are common, and as the number of ACEs increase, so does the risk for negative health outcomes, including diminished executive functioning. These are the skills that help us effectively manage our time, problem solve, regulate our emotions, and initiate tasks. The skills that are critical for your adult customers to accomplish their goals and succeed. We will talk more in depth about executive functions later in this module. For now, we're going to talk about the more extreme side of stress, trauma. Trauma has several characteristics. It is based on real or perceived threat to self or others. For example, trauma can occur after an actual incident, or it can occur when there is fear that something may occur. For example, when someone lives in a home or neighborhood where they are regularly afraid that violence may occur, even if it has not already occurred to them. Trauma can happen with a single incident, such as sexual assault, or with a recurring exposure, which can occur with children growing up in unhealthy homes, or adults in the military and law enforcement who experience a recurring sense of danger. A key characteristic of trauma is that it elicits intense and overwhelming feelings of fear and helplessness about one's own safety and/or the safety of others. Sadly, the effects of trauma include both immediate and long-term consequences, including unpredictable emotions such as anger, guilt, self-blame, hopelessness, numbness, and fear. Health challenges such as insomnia, difficulty concentrating, anxiety, depression, body aches and pains, irritability, and a host of other chronic illnesses. Trouble with relationships as a result of the challenges associated with managing the recurring and troublesome thoughts and feelings, which can lead to someone isolating themselves, lashing out at others, or being regularly defensive, among others. If someone is struggling with the effects of trauma, it will make it more challenging for them to secure and maintain long-term employment. Earlier, we mentioned that adverse childhood experiences and toxic stress can have a negative impact on executive functions. Trauma can also have a negative impact on executive functions. So, what are executive functions? In short, these are a set of mental skills designed to help you get things done. Harvard University's Center on the Developing Child has done a lot of research on the connection between adverse childhood experiences on executive functions in childhood and the effects into adulthood. To help simplify this, we have categorized executive functions into two main categories, organizational and regulatory. Organizational skills refer to a set of executive function skills that pertain to how we gather, structure, and evaluate information. Regulatory skills refer to a set of executive function skills that help us notice our surroundings, analyze the information from our surroundings, and respond appropriately. Here are some examples of executive function skills for each category. Although the list is not exhaustive, it can help you begin to contextualize how diminished executive function skills may affect someone in their typical daily activities. Planning and prioritizing includes skills related to goal setting, determining the most important aspects of a to-do list, and figuring out how to most efficiently get from point A to point B. Organization refers to both the mental organization of thoughts, ideas, and logical sequencing, as well as one's ability to organize their physical space. Task initiation is the ability to get started on something. This can be really challenging if someone also struggles with creating a plan and knowing how to prioritize the tasks within the plan. Working memory is our ability to hold information in our mind and then use this information to complete a task. Response inhibition is our ability to refrain from knee-jerk reactions to wants, thoughts, and feelings. In short, our ability to delay gratification and think before we act. Self-monitoring refers to our self-awareness and ability to objectively assess and adjust our own behavior, thoughts, feelings, and performance. Emotional control is the skill related to refraining from emotional expression until first considering the situation, alternative explanations, other perspectives, end goals, etc. Flexibility is our ability to roll with change, to be open-minded, and to consider creative alternatives and multiple possibilities. At the end of this module, there is a recommended exercise on the connection between behaviors you may observe in customers and specific executive functions that may be affected. Sometimes it can feel discouraging to talk about the variety of challenges customers may face that feel beyond the program and our role. The good news is that research has demonstrated that anything we do to support customers helps to build their resiliency. Resiliency, as defined by the American Psychological Association, is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. Research has demonstrated that humans innately have the ability to adapt and grow from adverse circumstances. Resilience can include behaviors, thoughts, and actions. Regardless of someone's life experiences or current mindset, they can learn and develop traits that promote resiliency. Some of the ways people can develop or strengthen their resilience is through connections with others. For instance, research shows healthy, close relationships or belonging as a member to a group, as well as diverse social support networks, provide opportunities for us to receive help and support. It also helps us to provide help and support to others. Movement towards goals can also strengthen resilience. This entails focusing energy on reasonable goals in the desired direction of dreams and away from adverse circumstances. By supporting decisive actions rather than hoping life circumstances will change on their own, or trying to avoid dealing with negative situations. It can also include broadening perspectives, such as the ability to see problems more fully or objectively. Resilience encourages us to think past the crisis of the moment and through potential long-term implications, to focus on things that can be changed, to use negative experiences as opportunity to learn something about oneself and the world. It can be frustrating and discouraging when customers don't follow through with their agreements and act in ways that are unpleasant. Unfortunately, sometimes we or others may negatively interpret a customer's undesirable behaviors, including chronic tardiness, absenteeism, or lack of follow-through with agreements, as being about the other person's character. Instead, what you may see is the consequence of trauma, diminished executive functioning, the stress of dealing with family, work, and program requirements, and a variety of other circumstances that the customer may not have shared with us. Knowing this, strive to discuss specific behaviors you observed with the customer. For instance, that he or she was late for the last 2 appointments, rather than your interpretation of those behaviors, which may be seen to you as not caring or not respecting of your time. Remember, we each have our own challenges, and we can support customers' innate ability to adapt, learn, grow, and overcome these challenges. Take a moment to think of a customer that behaves in ways you find frustrating. When you interpret and label those behaviors as negative character flaws, such as they are lazy, don't care, or are disrespectful, how do you feel towards that customer? Now, remove your interpretation of their behaviors and the labels you have used. Instead, think about as many possible explanations for the behavior that we do not have to do with the customer's character. For example, perhaps they are overwhelmed, confused, trying to juggle competing priorities, etc. When you reframe your labels, how do you feel towards that customer? How we interpret and react to someone else's behavior can negatively affect our ability to work in partnership with them. When you find yourself frustrated with a customer's behavior, try this exercise and see if you can shift your approach to a place of curiosity instead of judgment. We have discussed how living in poverty is stressful and how toxic stress and trauma can negatively affect health and executive functioning. Now we are going to talk about additional stressful and sometimes traumatizing circumstances that can further challenge a customer's ability to secure long-term employment. Before we proceed into the more complex topics we ask in the OCAT appraisal, let's start with a list of the many potential challenges to employment a customer may face. You may find that some of these are a lot easier to discuss with customers than others. You may be wondering, why do we ask about all of these potential challenges? As you may have already witnessed in working with customers, life circumstances beyond low education and low job skills can be a significant barrier to getting and keeping a long-term livable wage job. As such, it is critical to tease out the variety of issues that may negatively impact job readiness and the ability to maintain employment, so that we can work in partnership with customers and support them towards achieving their goals. By gaining a more comprehensive understanding of the customer's circumstances, you are also able to identify the customer's strengths and skills that will help them address their challenges to employment, promote and affirm their resiliency, and connect them to resources that best fit their needs, goals, and wishes. We and our customers likely share a vision of wanting the customers to be healthy, self-sufficient, and gainfully employed for the long haul. To achieve this, we have to look at the full picture of their life, which is more than just attaching them to employment. If the customer has a job, but everything else in their life is falling apart, they will quickly lose that job. A quick note on boundaries. As a case manager, you may find yourself relating to the customer's story, wanting to help them beyond your role or wanting to relate to them to build rapport. Remember, it is about the customer and not you, so refrain from disclosing too many details of your own story or sharing your own opinion about what you think they should do or not do. Be friendly and work in partnership with customers, but keep the relationship strictly business. It is not appropriate to pursue a friendship or spend time with a customer outside of the office. By limiting the personal information you disclose, you also prevent that information from potentially being used against you at a later time. As humans, we each have our own experiences, values, and opinions. Do your best to prevent your personal experiences and biases from interfering with your work with the customer. Remind yourself that we each respond to circumstances differently. Customers are the subject matter experts of their lives, and they are making the best decisions they can with the knowledge, skills, and resources available to them. Sometimes, when we don't know how to respond, if there is a silence or if we are trying to relate to the customer, we may feel like we just need to talk for the sake of talking. It is best to instead actively listen and limit your talking by paraphrasing what you believe they are saying. A reminder that it is not your job or within your role to diagnose. The purpose of asking questions is to identify where the customer may need more support from appropriate services and resources. It is understandable that some of the topics covered in the OCAT appraisal may be more challenging to ask and more uncomfortable for customers to answer than others. By learning more about each sensitive topic, substance use disorders, mental health disorders, and domestic violence, we can be more confident in our ability to navigate the conversation with customers who may or may not be ready to discuss. Before we begin, take a moment to think of all the beliefs about substance use disorders and those who have them that you've heard, observed, or adopted. Now ask yourself, how do these beliefs help or hinder supporting individuals experiencing substance use challenges? As we proceed through this section, reflect on your responses and consider how your beliefs may be reframed in order to more positively support those experiencing substance use challenges. What is a substance use disorder? You may have heard the terms addiction, substance abuse, and/or substance dependence. However, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, or DSM-5, no longer uses these terms. Rather, the correct term is substance use disorder. In the DSM-5, substance use disorders are defined based on their level of severity, mild, moderate, or severe, which is determined by the number of diagnostic criteria met by an individual. To be considered a substance use disorder, the use must be recurring or chronic in nature. In other words, there needs to be an established pattern of use. Additionally, the use must cause impairment, such as health problems, disability, and/or an inability to participate in daily activities. The failure to meet major responsibilities is also a criteria for diagnosis. It is important to note that the criteria for substance use disorders does not distinguish between whether or not it is a legal substance, like alcohol and tobacco, or an illegal substance. We're going to look at two scenarios that may or may not meet the criteria for substance use disorders to help contextualize the criteria. In scenario 1, someone had a single night of heavy drinking that caused significant impairment leading to missing work the next day. The criteria requires the behavior to be recurrent, so although this scenario may result in negative consequences with the employer, a single night would likely not meet the definition of a substance use disorder. In scenario 2, someone drinks between 4 and 5 glasses of wine a night without any reported interference to familial or work responsibilities. Although this behavior indicates it is recurrent, if the behavior does not result in impairment or failure to meet major responsibilities, it may not meet the definition for substance use disorder. These examples are to help you think about how experts in substance use disorders might interpret common behaviors based on the DSM-5 criteria. A reminder that it is not your job or within your role to diagnose. The purpose of asking questions is to identify where the customer may need more support from appropriate services and resources. This diagram outlines how substances affect brain functioning. The substance affects the brain by first mimicking naturally occurring chemicals in the brain, known as neurotransmitters, which are responsible for communication between neurons and all brain functioning. While the substance mimics naturally occurring neurotransmitters, it is not the same as the neurotransmitters created by our brain. Therefore, the substance confuses the brain and disrupts communication between neurons. Most substances target dopamine receptors in the brain, which are responsible for our experience of pleasure and pain. When our brain registers pleasure, it pays attention and wants to keep repeating the experience. The recurring reintroduction of the substances into the brain allows the brain to moderate itself and results in the brain producing less naturally occurring neurotransmitters. Once the brain learns to produce less to offset the substance, it requires the substance to maintain a balance of neurotransmitters. When it doesn't get the substance, the brain begins to have withdrawal, which can be experienced by the person as craving the substance, feeling flat or jittery, or experiencing pain. The most common theories on substance use are that while it may have been someone's choice the first few times they use substances, depending on their use, brain chemistry, and familial background, at some point it no longer becomes their choice. There is a lot of recent research to suggest that the lack of connection, being or feeling isolated from friends or family, may play a bigger role in the formation of substance use disorders than the brain chemistry alone. So, how do you know if someone is under the influence of substances? It can be hard to tell, but there are some more obvious signs that may indicate substance use disorder or other medical concerns that warrant evaluation by an expert. Signs and symptoms of substance use vary depending on the substance used. This is a list of some general symptoms related to changes in someone's appearance and/or behavior that may indicate substance use and can include abnormal pupils, such as either being very large, very small, or different sizes, abrupt weight change, such as rapid weight gain or weight loss, increased aggression or irritability, unusual changes in attitude or personality, unexplained financial problems, or sudden changes in a person's social network. If these signs are present, use the OCAT appraisal to guide you in asking about the customer's substance use, mental health, and general health. These are the most common substance use disorders in the United States: alcohol, tobacco, cannabis or marijuana, stimulants, also known as uppers, which include cocaine, amphetamines used to treat ADD and ADHD, and methamphetamine, commonly known as meth. Hallucinogens, which include LSD, ecstasy, PCP, and ketamine. Opioids include commonly prescribed painkillers and heroin. Regarding opioids, it is important to remember that someone may have been legitimately prescribed painkillers for an injury or condition, and then they became dependent on it, needing more and more to treat the pain, eventually developing a substance use disorder. Mental health disorders and substance use disorders share a few common characteristics. Before we dive into definitions and characteristics of mental health disorders, let's do an activity. Take a moment to think of all the beliefs about mental health disorders and those who haven't had them that you've heard, observed, or adopted. Now ask yourself, how do those beliefs help or hinder supporting individuals experiencing mental health challenges? As we proceed through this section, reflect on your responses and consider how your beliefs may be reframed in order to more positively support those experiencing mental health challenges. Similar to the DSM-5 definition of substance use disorder, the DSM-5 definition of mental disorder is also complex. For the purpose of this training, we refer to simplified definitions. A mental health disorder is a condition that significantly affects a person's thoughts, feelings, and/or behavior, causing distress and difficulty functioning. For many, their mental health disorder is undiagnosed, untreated, and even undertreated, whereby they cannot achieve a full level of functioning and life satisfaction. With affordable, high-quality treatment and support from loved ones, many symptoms can be alleviated. On the contrary, mental health is characterized by a state of well-being that includes emotional, psychological, and social well-being, overall satisfaction and optimism with self, social network, community, and life, and the ability to positively contribute to relationships, work, and society. When considering the factors that can either promote positive mental health or contribute to the development of mental health disorders, experts look to these social determinants: race and ethnicity, gender, age, income level, education level, sexual orientation, and geographic location. The risk factors for mental health disorders are heavily associated with social inequalities, whereby the greater the inequality, the higher the risk of developing a mental health disorder. Many of our customers experience multiple risk factors. It is important to remember your role is not to diagnose. This is a broad list of possible signs of mental illness that may warrant a referral to an expert. Excessive or intense feelings, which may include worry, fear, sadness, anger, irritability, or feeling high. Social challenges, such as avoiding friends and social activities, as well as difficulty understanding or relating to others. Changes in habits, including sleeping, eating, inability to carry out daily activities, or inability to handle stress. Challenges with perception, such as difficulty perceiving reality, hallucinations, delusions, confused thinking, difficulty concentrating, or learning. Health issues, including substance use disorder, as well as multiple physical ailments without obvious causes like headaches, stomach aches, and pain. Everything we do is dependent on neurons communicating with others throughout the brain. The space between neurons where communication occurs is called synapse, as illustrated in this picture. The brain chemicals, called neurotransmitters, that we discussed previously regarding substance use disorders, are responsible for the communication between neurons. When there is too much or too little neurotransmitter in the synapse, it disrupts the communication between neurons. This disruption in communication between neurons can show up in a host of ways, some of which are listed in these bullets. Serotonin. People with depression often have lower levels of serotonin. This neurotransmitter also affects memory and sleep. Dopamine. People with abnormal levels of dopamine may experience disruption with movement, as in Parkinson's disease, as well as pleasure and motivation, which plays out in bipolar disorders. Disruptions in dopamine can also affect the flow of information to the frontal cortex, responsible for processing information, which can show impairment in schizophrenia. Norepinephrine. This neurotransmitter is released in response to stress and can present a challenge with regulating norepinephrine, which can contribute to ADHD, insomnia, some of the arousal and hypervigilant symptoms of PTSD, anxiety, and depression. Although this is a simplified explanation, the interneurotransmitters do not act together to affect cognition and mood, which is one of the many reasons treating mental health disorders and other brain disorders may be very challenging, leaving individuals affected by these disorders discouraged and frustrated. Current theories attribute the development of mental health disorders to a combination of causes, including biological, psychological, and environmental. Biological factors include, although a person may inherit a susceptibility to a mental health disorder, the development of that disorder is dependent on the interaction of multiple genes and other factors like chronic stress or trauma. Birth defects, traumatic brain injuries, including concussions and infections, can contribute to the onset of mental health disorders. Long-term use of substances decreases the brain's ability to naturally produce neurotransmitters necessary for normal brain function, which may lead to the development of mental health disorders. Psychological factors that may result in the development of mental health disorders include emotional, physical, and/or sexual abuse, significant loss, like the loss of a parent during childhood, unexpected loss of a loved one, abandonment, and divorce, and environmental factors, which may include unpredictable family environments, which could be due to the factors including extremely difficult, different parenting styles, volatile relationships between family members, mental illness and substance use of family members, and/or openly aggressive or erratic behavior by a parent. Significant or regular changes to jobs and schools. Isolation from the lack of social networks, disconnection from family and friends due to geography or estrangement, and societal expectations. Examples include a society that associates beauty with thinness can be a factor in the development of an eating disorder, or societal views where someone is lesser than based on their gender, race, ethnicity, citizenship status, or sexual orientation or age, among others. Unhealthy or abusive relationships can also wreak havoc on a customer's ability to achieve their goals and be self-sufficient. Let's take a moment to explore common beliefs about unhealthy or abusive relationships. Take a moment to think about all the beliefs on unhealthy or abusive relationships and those who are in them that you've heard, observed, or adopted. Now ask yourself, how do those beliefs help or hinder supporting individuals experiencing unhealthy or abusive relationships? As we proceed through this section, reflect on your responses and consider how your beliefs may be reframed in order to more positively support those experiencing these relationships. How do these beliefs help or hinder supporting individuals experiencing unhealthy or abusive relationships? Let's start by exploring the definition of family. Who is in your family? The definition is really up to the individual and may include any of these relationships. Research has demonstrated that unhealthy and abusive relationships can negatively impact work by decreasing productivity, increasing errors due to being preoccupied about the relationship. Additionally, an inability to effectively communicate negatively impacts relationships on the job with colleagues, supervisors, and customers. Health, with an increase in anxiety, depression, substance use, and other chronic health conditions. Personal happiness is directly linked with relationship satisfaction. Life expectancy, because this can be significantly decreased due to more stress, more health issues, and less personal happiness. Although it may seem easier to think of relationships as simply healthy or unhealthy, the reality is that most of our relationships fall on a spectrum. By viewing relationships in this manner, we can better gauge where someone may benefit from additional support or intervention regarding their relationships. Let's first take a look at the characteristics of a healthy relationship. Respect, safety, support, equality, honesty, having separate identities, having good communication, playfulness, fondness, and trust. It is important to remember that all relationships experience challenges and conflicts. However, healthy relationships rebound from the challenges and use them to learn more about how to better meet each other's needs and strengthen their connection. All relationships exhibit unhealthy characteristics from time to time. To the extent that those characteristics become habitual and detrimental to others' well-being indicates the degree to which it may be unhealthy. Let's look at each characteristic. Distant refers to a lack of emotional connection and/or a lack of interest in the other person's life, feelings, or thoughts. Insensitive includes not thinking about partner's feelings, thoughts, opinions, or needs prior to speaking or acting. Judgmental is when someone holds a negative view of a partner's intentions, actions, words, and values. Dishonesty includes intentionally omitting information, telling lies, being deceitful, and lacking integrity. Frequent conflict is unresolved and recurring issues that result in arguments or ongoing tension with difficulty reconnecting afterwards. Disrespect could include poor manners and a lack of concern for another's time or feelings. Confusion is the uncertainty of a partner's commitment to the relationship as well as their intentions. Jealousy occurs when there is insecurity that the partner may find someone more enjoyable to be around or more lovable. Abusive relationships are different in that the partner's behavior is intentional to try to assert power and control over the other person's thoughts, behavior, and feelings. It is important to emphasize that abusive relationships include a pattern of behavior. Here are examples of each characteristic. Blame is a lack of accountability whereby anything wrong is the other person's fault. Accusations are anything negative pertaining to the other's behavior, thoughts, and intentions. Rage is violent, uncontrollable anger. Unpredictable is the roller coaster-like uncertainty where the relationship may feel good one minute and turn hostile the next. Hurtful in that the partner regularly and deliberately uses hurtful words and actions aimed at eroding the other's self-esteem. Criticism is similar to hurtful and designed to attack a person's beliefs, values, personality, feelings, thoughts, and opinions in order to erode self-esteem and assert control over the other. Unsafe refers to feeling both emotional and physically unsafe around the partner, unable to be fully oneself and walking on eggshells. Lack of boundaries occurs when the abusive partner constantly infringes on boundaries, doesn't respect privacy, and/or refuses to allow the other to have a separate activity with friends or family. This is the power and control wheel, which outlines ways in which a partner may try to assert control over the other. It is important to note that an abuser can be either male or female. Take a few moments to review each tactic on the screen. While many of the examples provided likely make sense, here are a few additional considerations. Using economic abuse can include forcing the other to work or to get benefits, and then not allowing them to access any of the money. Using male privilege can also include any deliberate use of privilege over another with the intention to control. Other examples of using privilege include citizenship status, where the partner may threaten to report the other to the authorities, dominant language, where the partner may tell the other that no one will understand them or believe them because they don't speak the dominant language. Mental health, where the partner may use the other's mental health disorder against them by convincing them that no one will believe them. And sexual orientation, where a partner may threaten to tell the other's family or colleagues about their sexual orientation or history. Once these tactics are in motion, it becomes harder and harder for someone to leave an unhealthy relationship, especially if they are concerned about the safety of their children and fear that the abuser will get parenting rights. When you are considering common beliefs that exist about people who are in unhealthy or abusive relationships, you may have thought about the common advice: why don't they just leave? Before we talk about more why it can be so hard to just leave, let's rewind to the beginning of these relationships and note that it is rare that an abusive relationship starts out physically abusive. In fact, many abusive relationships may not ever become physically abusive. As you could see by the power and control wheel, there are a variety of ways the abuser has asserted control long before physical abuse enters the relationship. The effects of the power and control tactics make it hard to leave. At the point someone may realize that they are no longer in just an unhealthy relationship, but also in an abusive one, they may have a hard time of leaving. There may be several reasons for this, including the person having negative self-belief because the partner has blamed, criticized, accused, and eroded over time their sense of self-worth and self-efficacy. A person may believe they are incapable of surviving or thriving without the abusive partner. Feeling unable to support oneself because the partner has isolated them from financial resources as well as support networks. Fear of losing children. The reality is that many perpetrators are able to gain full custody of their children. Consider to yourself, would you intentionally put your children in harm's way every other weekend, half the time, or 100% of the time in order to no longer live with the abuser? Or would you consider staying as an added way to hopefully protect the safety of your children? Threats to physical safety, and, as strange as it may sound, love. Again, abusive relationships rarely start out that way, and even abusive people don't act in abusive ways all the time. They have redeeming qualities that are lovable. As humans, we tend to be hopeful that things will get better, and perpetrators excel at making empty promises. When abuse is suspected, it is important to not refer the individual to couples counseling or a couples relationship class, where the perpetrator can use that information against the other. Instead, refer the individual seeking help from the abuse to programs like these, which can provide wraparound relationship support services. Now we'll discuss key takeaways from the module, additional recommended exercises to strengthen what you learned today, and recommended resources available through the OCAT Learning Center. In this module, we explored the connections between poverty, trauma, and executive functioning. We also discussed how substance use disorders, mental health disorders, and unhealthy or abusive relationships may negatively impact long-term self-sufficiency. In understanding the intersections between a customer's circumstances and ability to seek and maintain livable wage employment, you can apply a trauma-informed, person-centered approach when navigating sensitive topics with customers. Remember, through positive interactions between the caseworker and customer, both have the opportunity to gain a clearer understanding of the customer's circumstances. It is not your role to diagnose. Ask questions with the goal of determining how you can connect customers to appropriate services and resources. Be aware of labels you or others may use when describing customer behaviors and work to reframe them. It is more constructive to discuss specific behaviors you observed and not your interpretation of those behaviors. After completing this module, print the handouts provided and complete the recommended exercises. To complete this exercise, print the handout titled Executive Functions. To complete this exercise, print the handout titled Common Substances. This exercise was also provided in Module 1 of the OCAT Virtual Training Series, Improving Customer Engagement Through Powerful Interviewing Techniques. For that module, the goal of the exercise was to practice actively listening and applying motivational interviewing techniques. For this module, the purpose of the activity is to strengthen your interviewing approach and adjust your approach if needed, based on the information you learned during this module about the sensitive topics. We also have several additional recommended resources you can view if you want to dig deeper into motivational interviewing. Thank you for taking this training. We hope it has been valuable to you and helped strengthen your interactions with customers.